In this video, we're going to be talking about what is changing and what is staying the same on the CISP exam after the exam and curriculum updates on April 15th, 2024. And I wanted to make this video so you can make an informed decision on which test to take. Hi, this is Thor Petersen, and if you don't know me, let me introduce myself really quickly. I am a CISP, CISM, PNP, and certified in cybersecurity trainer. I have close to 500,000 enrollments in my courses from more than 195 countries across the world. So if you're studying for your CISP, CISM, or CC exams, you can join those students and get my courses on thorteaches.com or on Udemy. I'm going to try to keep this video as short as possible while still making sure you get all the information that you need, and it is exactly long enough to cover the changes on the 8 domains and the exam itself. I do the same in my courses. I don't really want to waste your time or mine with non-essentials. So every 3 years, the CISP curriculum is updated, and we now know the next one will be on April 15th, 2024. The last one was in 2021, and we assume the one after that will be in 2027. For the 2024 update, the 8 domains are staying the same. The names are the same. The only change is that 1% is removed from domain 8 and is moved to domain 1. So we get 1% more weighted questions in domain 1. That said, there are some changes on the exam, and it's mostly new topics or expanded topics that we will cover in a minute. And just to be clear, this is based on the exam outline, which is very high level. It's not in great detail like the CISP CBK. So we know the high level changes, we do not know the detailed ones. Now, if you take your exam on or before April 14th, 2024, you will be tested on the current curriculum and domain weights, and you will get between 125 to 175 questions. You will have 4 hours to answer them. And out of those questions, there will be 50 beta questions in the first 125 questions. The exam is a CAT exam. If you take the exam on or after April 15th, 2024, you will be tested on the new curriculum with the new domain weights, and you will get between 100 and 150 questions, and you will have 3 hours to answer those questions. 25 of the questions will be beta questions, and they're randomly dispersed in the first 100 questions. You don't know which ones are beta questions. So assuming you go all the way to 150 questions, that means you have 72 seconds to answer each single question. The exam is still a CAT exam. That means that the more right answers you get early on, the harder questions you get. Those harder questions are worth more points, meaning the more early questions you answer right, the higher chance you have of passing. Which is also why I suggest spending more time on the first 10, maybe 20 questions, because getting a slightly higher percentage of those right are going to give you harder questions worth more points with a higher chance of passing. So with 100 to 150 questions and 3 hours, we're back to the exam duration we had before the changes in 2022. My guess is that they changed the exam in 2022 to replenish their exam pool. They raised it to 50 beta questions because they had the online proctor testing, and I would assume that they see all the questions that have been used in online proctoring as contaminated, meaning they need more questions, so they raised the beta questions to 50. Now they're back to 25. And no, you cannot do remote proctor tests with ISC anymore. And I think now is a good point to answer some of the common questions we as instructors keep getting every time the exam changes. After that, we will look at the actual changes. If you are already studying, should you take the exam before the changes? If it was me, I would. Even though we know the changes are probably minor, there might be other changes that we just don't know about. Right now, we also have the updated materials. We have the videos, we have the books, the questions, the study guides, and so on. We have everything for the current exam. Once the new exam is released, yes, there will be new resources, but there's normally a lag to get those out, meaning there might be months where you can't get the books or the questions or whatever you need. Next is a question I get a lot. I already have your courses on Udemy or Thor Teaches. Do I need to buy them again for the updated exam? And the answer is no. For my courses, I always do in-place upgrades, meaning if you already have my course or you're planning to buy them soon on either Udemy or thorteaches.com, you get the update for free. And Udemy includes both Udemy Business and the Udemy Marketplace. And I am only updating my courses on those 2 platforms, not on any others. For students who have already purchased their study materials, but they plan to take the exam after April 15th, is that enough? And I'm going to say you should probably, to a large extent, be fine. Like I said, my videos and questions will be updated in place. If you're talking about other materials, they will be 95% okay, but I would study the new topics from other sources. As to when materials for the 2024 exam changes will be ready, it really depends. For my videos, for my questions, I don't know. I think all the new videos I'm going to make on the new or expanded content will be ready before the exam changes. And then I'm probably also going to re-record some of my other videos, even though there are no changes, just to make them better explanations, better examples. I'm going to do the stuff that is updated or changed first, and then the videos I'm just making better will be done after. As far as the official study guide or the AIO, the books are normally out 3 to 6 months after the exam changes. The same with the official practice questions and the AIO questions, normally a few months after that. And we don't know if that's true this time, right? But that's what we've seen the last 2 or 3 exam changes. As far as when other instructors' videos and questions are ready, I have no clue. You would need to ask them. Mine should be ready before the exam change. Is there going to be a price change on the exam? Not that we know of at this time. That can change, but right now there's not planned any changes. And then for the ever-appearing question, how should I study for my CISP? And it was a question I got so many times that I actually made a free course on how to study. Free little 2-hour course where I answer all those questions. Which materials to use, how to use them, when to use them, how to work on questions, how to deconstruct questions, time management, all the practical stuff that you need that is almost just as important as knowing the curriculum. You can get that course at free.thorteaches.com, and that course, of course, also will be updated for the new exam. All right, let's get to the fun part. Let's look at the actual exam changes for the CISP in 2024. And just for you, I have made this awesome Excel spreadsheet. So let's start. If we look at 1.1, no major changes, nothing at all. The code of conduct is exactly the same. 1.2, same thing. Confidentiality, integrity, availability, authenticity, and non-repudiation. The only change is they now say the 5 pillars of information security. 1.3, almost no changes at all either. The only real change is 1.3.4, where they actually give examples of what some of those frameworks could be. I think we cover most of those already, so potentially a slight change. 1.4, again here, a slight potential change, but again, it's only expanding on and explaining what that could cover. And then the old 1.5 is rolled into 1.4. So you're going to see a little bit discrepancy when we look at the further objectives. You can see here, the old 1.6 is now 1.5. Nothing changed in 1.5, 1.6. 1.7, we actually have new content for our business impact analysis, and that is external dependencies. Which completely makes sense, right? Because if we don't have those dependencies covered in our business impact analysis, well, then it's not going to be complete. That can be vendors, suppliers, utilities, third-party IT, cloud services, transport, logistics. It really is anyone who's an external entity that we need for our BIA. And then over on the right side, you can see 1.8.2 in the old curriculum, develop and document the scope and the plan that has been removed. And for most things, if not everything that I say have been removed, it probably just got rolled into one of the other sub-bullets. I don't really think they removed very much at all. And the only things I've ever seen IC² remove is terms and technologies that we no longer use. But to be honest, they also have a ton of stuff that we don't use, right? So anything you see over here in the 2021 column that's in orange, it's probably not removed. It's probably just moved in somewhere else. All right, let's continue. So 1.8, most of it maps directly. The only 2 that have been removed, 1.9.5 and 0.6, the compliance policy requirements and the privacy policy requirements. Again here, I assume they got rolled into 1.8.2. You can see that below here. 1.10, slight changes. So we still have the risk analysis and assessment, but they also added scope. The same with the monitoring and measuring. They now name it as continuous monitoring. Which makes sense, right? It's not just monitor. We need to continue, we need to update, we need to make sure that we're actually monitoring things that make sense. And then the old 10.10.10, I assume that's been removed and added into the new 1.9.3. So countermeasure selection and implementation, because that is a big part of what risk response and treatment is. 1.10, no changes other than the numbering because we removed 1.5 earlier. 1.11, the same. But we do have some expansion here, right? Before it was hardware, software, and services. Now it's the acquisition of products and services from suppliers and providers. And then they give some examples on what that could be. And then they kind of combined the last 3 points on 1.12 from 2021 into 1.11.2 on the 2024 version. So that single bullet point 1.11.2 has the third-party assessments and monitoring, minimum security requirements and service level agreements, and many more things. So combined and slightly expanded. Again here, not any major changes, but they did add including emerging technologies and trends, e.g. cryptocurrency, AI, and blockchain, which makes sense because all three of those are much more prevalent today than they were 3 years ago. And that really are the changes for domain 1. Next up, we have domain 2. No changes in the domain weight, no changes in the name. Domain 2 actually has 0 changes. It stays exactly the same. Domain 3 has minor changes to the curriculum. No name change and no percentage change. The first minor change we see is 3.1.7, where before it was keep it simple, now it's keep it simple and small. And here small means that we minimize the coding base. We can use microservices. We can go in and review and prune any outdated or redundant parts that we don't need anymore. We want a lean architecture. It's really keeping everything as small as it possibly needs to be for us to still do exactly what we need. We're minimizing the attack surface. Then we have 3.1.8, zero trust or trust but verify. If you look over at the old objectives, there were 2 separate bullet points, now there are 1. And then 3.1.11 in the 2024 outline, we have Secure Access Services Edge. This is new content. And it really just is a security framework that combines network security and wide area networking capabilities in a single cloud-based service. To put it simply, it allows for people and devices to securely access applications or services no matter where they are. Then 3.2, 3, and 4, exactly the same. 3.5, we have a slight change, whereas before it was industrial control systems, now it's operational technology / industrial control systems. Operational technologies is a large range of equipments and systems, from sensors and actuators to controllers, networks, and software tools. And we normally use OT systems in critical infrastructure like electric grids, water facilities, or manufacturing plants. Industrial control systems is a subset of OT. And ICS really are the control systems used in industrial environments. That can be a SCADA system or distributed control system, programmable logic controllers, PLCs. So they're just slightly expanding where before we need to know about the ICS, now we need to know about the overarching one too. Nothing else new in 3.5, 3.6, including in PKI, public key infrastructure. They have also added quantum key distribution. And in theory, quantum key distribution theoretically offers unbreakable encryption, because any attempt to break the key will get detected, and that key is never used again for actual encryption if there is a breach. So this is definitely something I'm going to make a new lesson on. Then we have the old 3.6.5, 0.6, and 0.7. They're all rolled into the new 3.6.5. 3.7, no changes. 3.8, no changes. 3.9, no changes. And then we have an entirely new thing here. 3.10, manage the information system lifecycle. Now, while it is entirely new, it's also something that we've touched on and we have discussed before. And it is something that has been part of both the knowledge and the curriculum, but we mostly have talked about the information lifecycle, not the system. So really here, it's just the process that's going to oversee the various stages of an information system that it goes through from when we get it to we retire that system. We start out with stakeholder needs and requirements. Here, we gather and identify the specific needs, expectations, and requirements from all the individuals either involved or affected by the system, just like any regular stakeholder management. And really all these steps, right, is what we would do for any system. But now spelled out and we have the full life cycle. We do a requirements analysis. Again here, deep dive into the gathered requirements to understand, clarify, and detail out the system's necessities. Then we do architectural design. That is the high-level blueprint of the system that outlines its structures, components, and relationships. Development and implementation. Here, we do the actual creation or coding of the system based on everything we did in the design phase. Then we go into integration. Here, we make sure that all the parts of the system works together seamlessly, especially if they have been developed independently. And we also want to make sure that that system works with all the other systems it needs to talk to. Then we do verification and validation. We go back and we make sure that this system meets all of the initial requirements and functions, and it functions correctly in the intended environment. Then we do transition or deployment. That's a rollout to actual use. and the transition from the old systems and processes if we had some. Operation, maintenance, and sustainment. That's the actual use of the system, the ongoing maintenance, the ongoing management, the updates, the patches, all the necessary changes that it needs to operate smoothly. And then at the end of the life cycle, we have retirement and disposal. Whenever the system is no longer needed, well, then we need to make sure that it's retired properly. We need to make sure that we have data migration if we need it, archiving, whatever else we need, and then safely decommission the system to make sure there's no remnants, nothing that can be used against us. So entirely new subsection, but not really something new. Then we move into domain 4. Same name, same percentage, slight change to the curriculum. First off, we have 4.1.5. Again here, they just added InfiniBand over Internet and Compute Express Link. So not really a major change, they're just spelling them out. What is entirely new is 4.1, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, 17, and 18. And when I say entirely new, take that with a grain of salt. A lot of it we have touched on in the old curriculum. I've covered it in my courses, but some of it is new and some of it is spelled out. So first off, we have transport architecture. How does data move and is managed within our network? That is topologies, the distinction between data control and management planes, cut through and store and forward. Next up, we have performance metrics. They actually used to be in the 2018 exam, but they were removed as individual bullet points in the 2021 exam. Now they're back. So again here, performance metrics. How well does our network perform? What is the efficiency and the quality of it? So how fast can we transfer? What is the latency? What is the jitter? And latency is the delay in data transfer, how many milliseconds. The jitter is the variance in the delay. Throughput is how much data can we push through. And then signal to noise ratio is we compare the signal strength against the background noise. So a new bullet point on the exam, but not something we haven't seen before. The traffic flows are not entirely new. It's a little different wording. It's really the direction and patterns of data movement in our network, either north-south, meaning it moves in and out of our network, or east-west, it's moving laterally within the network. Then we have physical segmentation. Again here, nothing super new. Do we physically segment our network? Do we have in-band, out-of-band? And is our network air-gapped? In-band means we use the same network both for management and use the data. Out-of-band means we have an entirely separate network just for management. And air-gapped meaning it's completely isolated. There is no outside connectivity outside of that specific network. Then we have edge networks. This was covered on the 2021 exam, but now there's more focus on it. And I think that goes for all these bullet points in 4.1. It's stuff we've talked about before. It's stuff we've covered. Now there's more importance on these topics, so they get their own bullet points. Then we have virtual private cloud, also something we've covered before, but more emphasis, and there will be more emphasis on AI services, on machine learning, on cloud computing, because it's just something we use much more of now than we did some years ago, and presumably over the next couple of years, we're going to use it even more. And then finally in 4.1, we have monitoring and management. It's the tools and the strategies we use to manage, observe, and optimize the network. And observability really just means how good are our insights into the network performance. Traffic shaping and flow. We manage the direction and volume of the data. Capacity management kind of speaks for itself, right? We manage the capacity of the data. And then fault detection and handling. How do we identify and rectify any issues? And most of this, if not all, should be done automatically. Next up, we have 4.2, no changes. 4.3, slight changes, but not really. Mostly stuff that are condensed into other bullet points, which brings us to domain 5. Domain 5, same name, same percentage, and minor changes to the curriculum. 5.1, control physical and logical access to assets is exactly the same, except we have added services. 5.1.6, which I think also makes sense. And services are authentication services, directory services, access control services, network access control services. It's really anything that we do that helps us with physical and logical access control. We have some sort of service helping us do that. Now it has its own bullet point. In 5.2, there's a slight name change I expect, where in the old version, it was identity management implementation. Now it's groups and roles. Again here, nothing new, just a couple of bullet points combined what we had in the 2021 exam and all stuff that we've talked about before. Authentication, authorization, accounting, multi-factor authentication, passwordless authentication. Just slightly changed where the bullet points are. 5.3, no changes. 5.4, there is some new content in implement and manage authorization mechanisms. On top of what we had in the 2021 exam, we also now have access policy enforcement. And a policy decision point is just a component of the system that makes the decision whether to grant the access or deny it. It goes in and evaluates the request against the access policies and rules to determine if a specific action, read, write, delete, by use or system should be allowed or not. And then policy enforcement point, PEP, once the policy decision point is made, then the PEP is responsible for enforcing that decision. If the PDP allows it, then the PEP permits the action. If the PDP denies it, the PEP blocks the decision. You can think of it like the policy decision point is the judge who's either allowing or not allowing something based on the rules. The policy enforcement point is then the security guard that implements that decision by either granting or denying access based on the PDP's verdict. 5.5, we also have one change, new content. And that one, I think it's something we have covered before. I don't really think it's a change, it just gets its own bullet point. Service account management. We have always known that service accounts are dangerous. They are important to servicing our environment, but very often service accounts have elevated privileges so they can do their specific tasks, which also means because they have the higher access, they are much more interesting targets for attackers. So they've added the management of the service accounts, so we make sure that they are secure and functioning while not posing any unnecessary risks. And if we no longer need that service account, it needs to be retired. 5.6, they have actually removed all the sub-bullet points. It's just implement authentication systems, but I'm just going to go ahead and assume that all those plus more are still included in the curriculum. I don't think there's any actual change. Then we have domain 6, still 12%, still the same domain name. Slight changes to the curriculum. So we still have the same design and validate assessment, test, and audit strategies, internal, external, third party, but with us moving more into cloud, we need to think of entirely new things because what and how we can audit is completely different in our own environment, in our data center versus a cloud environment. And you're going to see when we get to 6.5, exactly the same considerations. Where the system is, where the data is going to play a significant role in the assessment, test, and audit strategies because each individual location is going to have a unique set of challenges and advantages, and understanding them is vital for us to provide that comprehensive security we want and to make the right evaluations. Depending on the cloud environment, we may not even be able to audit. So really, it's just focusing on what the differences are when we want or need to audit our cloud systems. 6.2, no major changes. They did add to the synthetic transactions, they added benchmarks. I think that makes sense. 6.3, same thing, no changes. 6.4, no changes. 6.5, that's the same one we just talked about. 6.1 was to develop the audits. 6.5 is to actually do them. So I don't think we really need to talk about this one more. We just did. Which moves us into domain 7. Same name, same percentage as before, slight changes to the curriculum. Most of domain 7 is completely unchanged. 7.1 is completely unchanged. 7.2, we have the source systems. I know I've covered them at least on the last 2 iterations of the exam, so nothing new here, but they are becoming more prevalent over SIEM systems, so it makes sense to add them on their own. And then for the continuous monitoring, they also added tuning. It's wonderful that we monitor things, but as I mentioned many times in my lectures, if we don't tune the system right, it really does nothing. 7.3, 7.4, exactly the same. 7.5, we have some added content, but it's again not something we haven't seen before. When we talk about resource protection, we've talked about media management and media management protection techniques. Now they just add the layer of what do we do when the data is at rest? What do we do when the data is in transit? Again, topics we've covered before, but they get their own bullet point because they are slightly more important now. 7.6, no changes. 7.7, no changes. 7.8, 9, and 10, no changes. 7.11, no changes. And then a slight change in 7.12. We added new content. But again here, it's not something new, right? 7.12 is Test Disaster Recovery Plan. The only thing they've added is communications, which in IT is sometimes something we're not very good at. Even if it's just a test, there's still extra adrenaline. We want to fix things. We don't communicate that well. So now it gets its own bullet point. So we notify our stakeholders, the ones that are relevant. That can be management, IT personnel, end users. They need to understand what's going to happen. Since this is just a test, they need to know what's happening, when is it happening, and if they have any roles or responsibilities. Then we need to update the test status, not just when we're done. If it's something that's going to take a while, we need to give progress reports, and we need to have clearly communicated to those stakeholders when to expect those reports. Because if they know every hour we're going to get an update, they're not going to bug us while we're doing our testing. Depending on the industry we're in, we might also have to communicate with regulators, even if we're just doing testing. And then just like we have with our DRP, we have communication plans that are specific for emergencies. What kind of backup systems do we have if things are down? That can be we have a backup email system, satellite phones, radio systems. It really depends on what we're testing. Once we have done the test, we need a feedback mechanism. Again, here, doing the test on its own, if we don't act on what we've learned, if we don't fix things, it doesn't really matter. So we need some sort of feedback mechanism so the people that have been affected by the test, they have a way of telling us what happened, what they liked, what they didn't like, what they experienced. Then we need to document that, and then we need to do the lessons learned or the post-test debrief. All the things that we have documented, all the things that we have learned, and we do that with all the parties involved. We discuss the outcomes, the challenges we faced, the lessons learned, which will then help us refine the DRP, and then when we have an actual disaster, we can do better. Now, if the DRP might impact customers or the public, well then we need to have some sort of communication with them as well. How do we communicate effectively and efficiently with the public? How do we manage their expectations? They are a stakeholder. We need to make sure that we address their concerns too. So I think this is a good addition here because in IT, like I said, we are a little bit bad about communication. So calling it out like this, excellent. And that should be all the changes for domain 7, 7.13, 14, 15, no changes. The security training and awareness, they just added some specifics, but nothing really new. Domain 8 stays the same with the name, but 1% less weighted exam questions. The only change in 8.1 is they added scaled agile frameworks. And that really just is an approach for large organizations where they can adopt agile practices in a way that is more conducive to their size and their complexity. Whereas if they use Scrum or Kanban, it's not so tailored for large organizations. It'll work well on small teams or small organizations. So really, what do you do if you have 10,000 or 100,000 people in your organization and you want to use Agile? Well, then you use the scaled Agile framework. Again, here, I'm going to make another lesson on that. Then in 8.2, we have a slight change. In 8.2.9, we have added software composition analysis and interactive application security test. A software composition analysis is a tool that analyzes open source components in software applications to identify any vulnerabilities. And IST tools are designed to identify and report vulnerabilities in web applications in real time during their normal operations and interactions. So we test in a live environment. Both of them make sense. It's more common now to use open source software, and we're using a lot more web applications. And then we remove the source system from here to where it is earlier in the curriculum. I think that makes perfect sense. It shouldn't be in 8.2.7. 8.3, no changes. 8.4, there is new content, but it's again in line with what we talked about before. 8.4 is assessing security impacts of acquired software. We already looked at COTS, open source, third-party, and managed services. Now they're adding cloud services. Makes sense, right? But using cloud services for acquired software also brings new security concerns, like data protection and privacy. Where is the data stored? Does it comply with regional and industry-specific regulations? How do we handle access and identity management? How much control do we have over the environment? Who does what in incident response and monitoring? Because again here, remember with the cloud services, we may have very much control or very little control. A topic that makes complete sense to add. It's something we have talked about before on the 2021 exam, but now it's just spelled out in its own bullet points. And then finally, 8.5, also no changes. So you can see on the exam outline, there really aren't a lot of changes, and the changes that are there makes complete sense. More AI, more quantum computing, more cloud, more focus on stakeholders. All things that we should be doing already. So to do a brief recap, there is a 1% change. We take 1% of the weighted domain questions from domain 8 to domain 1. The new exam is 100 to 150 questions, and you have 3 hours to answer those questions. It's a CAT exam, and assuming you get the full 150 questions, you have 72 seconds to answer every single question. My guess is there is maybe 3-4% of new curriculum, and most of that is stuff that we've talked about already, but now we're going to go a little more in depth in it. So in domain 1, we added external dependencies on our BC requirements. Domain 2, no real changes. Domain 3, secure access service edge. We added the quantum key distribution. We have an entirely new topic on managing the information system lifecycle. In domain 4, we added transport architecture, performance metric, traffic flows, physical segmentations, edge networking, PVCs, and then more monitoring and management. In domain 5, in control physical and logical access to assets, we added services. In authorization mechanisms, we added policy decision points and policy enforcement points. And then we added service account management in the identity and access provisioning lifecycle. In domain 6, minor changes as well. We added the location. Is it on-premise, is it cloud, or is it hybrid for our audits? In domain 7, we added communications to testing our DRP. Super critical, should always have been there, but now there's more emphasis on it. And then in domain 8, in SDLC, we added the scaled agile frameworks, the one that are for large enterprises. That really is it. So in my mind, very minor exam changes, the ones that we have make sense. And if I was taking the exam, like I said, I would take it before the exam change. But if you can't do that, I don't think worry about it. The changes are so minor, it shouldn't be a problem. And with that, we are done with this video. Thank you for being here. I hope this has helped you make a decision on when you want to take the exam and understand the exam updates. And I hope to see you in one of my classes.